Hey everyone, it's Shannon with Stack of Stones, and today we're going to talk about anxiety and depression. Okay, so this video falls into the series about different considerations. When you're working in a guardian role, there's some different mental health considerations I want you to have, things I want you to think about, and one of them is anxiety and depression because it's a part of life for all of us, okay? Let's talk about a couple different things I want you to know that apply to both anxiety and depression. So one of them is this idea that it's on a continuum. So something I want to fight about or fight against is this idea that a diagnosis like depression is a box and you're either in the box or you're not, right? That's not really how it works. Like a lot of things, anxiety and depression fall in a continuum. So sometimes our anxiety or depression is really low, sometimes it's really high. The reality is both anxiety and depression are a part of the human experience. They will be a part of your lives in one way or another because they're a part of all of our lives. One way to think about it may be to instead think about something like headaches or stomach aches. So if you met somebody and they told you, "Oh no, I've never had a headache in my life. I just don't get headaches," you would be like, "Really?" Because headaches are kind of a part of our experience, but they're on a continuum, right? So some of us don't get them very often, so we have a pretty low occurrence of headaches. Some of us are maybe more sensitive to things like fluorescent lights, or when we get really stressed and tight, we get headaches, right? So maybe we move a little bit up the continuum. And some of us struggle with things like migraines, right? So when we're really high on the continuum, that's when it starts to really interfere with our daily lives, right? So if someone has chronic, consistent migraines, that can make it really hard to do things like hold down a job or make social plans because you never know if you're going to be able to follow through. Depression and anxiety are a lot the same. Depression and anxiety can also be impacted by several different things, okay? So let's talk about what can kind of move us up and down this scale. One of the first things is just our biology or our chemistry. So just like somebody may be more likely to get migraines, some of us chemically, there's just some things that are a little bit misaligned. And so we feel either more anxious or more depressed based on the chemistry of our bodies, okay? This is real. This is the kind of thing that medication can really help with. It's the kind of thing that can be taken seriously. And that I hope we're moving towards a place of less shame and more trust in reality, okay? Or more trust in the fact that it is a real experience. Okay? Something else that can play in is personality, right? So, this isn't a big deal. There is no judgment at all on different personality types. But some of us are maybe more Tiggers and others are more Eeyores, right? Some of us just operate at maybe a lower level. We tend to be a little bit more subdued, see the world through a more pessimistic lens. Others of us are more likely to be bouncing off the walls and anxious and nervous about things. No judgment either way. We're all just different, and that may change how we flip to either side. Within that, though, there is something I want to talk about. Anxiety and depression can be happening simultaneously, right? We can be both anxious and depressed, okay? I don't want you to think that you are either anxious or depressed. The reality is they really kind of intermingle and mix together. We're going to talk about that more in a second. But I do want to make it clear that you're not either completely a Tigger or completely an Eeyore. You may have Tigger moments and Eeyore moments in 1 hour, right? That's totally normal, so don't worry about that. Okay, and then the third thing that can really add into this experience is circumstances, right? So our lives, what is happening in our lives can affect how high or low we are on the spectrum of anxiety or depression. So like all my videos, I'm making this video for guardians, right? Guardian is anyone who helps others in distress. By nature, that job, your work is going to click you up a couple notches on this continuum for various reasons. One, so if you haven't watched the videos I've made about some of the challenges of guardian work, go do that because we really talk about a lot of this. But one of those things is if you are interacting on a daily basis with people who are suffering, it's completely understandable that may make you feel more depressed or more anxious. That's normal, okay? You're seeing kind of the dark side of your community and the people around you. That may have some impact. That's normal and that's okay. Likewise, if you are spending most of your work days amped up, right? Maybe you are hypervigilant, not hypervigilant in a bad way. You are vigilant because that is what you need to do to stay safe. Or maybe you are operating with high levels of adrenaline, right? There's a lot of start and stop in your day. That may increase your levels of anxiety. Okay, that's an outcome of your work. It doesn't mean we just ignore it and let it be what it is, but it is the reality of your circumstances. I am recording this. I'm going to use this video later on. This is a more general video, but I am recording it in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. Okay, so I want you to think about our entire world. Our entire world has bumped up a couple notches on this spectrum just because we are in the middle of a pandemic, right? Things are crazy, and that is understandably having an impact, right? So we are either out on the front lines dealing with it or we're stuck at home. That's going to bring about all kinds of different feelings of depression and anxiety. It's a human experience, it's completely understandable, and as a society, we are going to be bumped up and elevated for a while. Okay? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what these look like specifically. But before I do so, I want to say a couple of things. One, I want you to know that however you are experiencing either anxiety or depression is fine and normal. One thing I get nervous about when I give like bullet points about what something looks like is that you're going to feel like, oh, I didn't match her bullet points. My experience doesn't matter. No. However things are working for you, that is fine and normal, and I want you to trust yourself and trust your gut. If you need to reach out for help and resources, trust it, even if it doesn't match the bullet points I give you, okay? I'm going to give you some of the most common stuff. That doesn't mean it's everything. And then secondly, reach out and ask for help. Don't wait until you've bumped all the way up to this high level. Reach out and ask for help when you're down in this area. You're going to have a lot more energy and ability to build a relationship with a therapist than you know that therapist. And when you're up here, they can step in and help. Okay, so let's talk about depression specifically. So I have a definition here. Both definitions I'm going to give you are from the American Psychiatry Association, okay, because I liked theirs the most. And they define depression as pervasive feelings of sadness and or loss of interest in activities previously enjoyed. Okay, pretty simple. So depression can look like a lot of things. And one is this idea of you're just sad and heavy all the time, right? So in the cartoons, depression is always the cloud above your head with rain that just kind of follows you around through the day. It's a pretty accurate description. Maybe you're just feeling sad and heavy, maybe kind of empty. Another thing that can happen is you might feel maybe worthless or guilty, and those feelings just kind of follow you. They're with you all the time, okay? That can be feelings of depression. And this can be low level, like maybe you just feel like that for, every now and then, it's not a big deal, or it can be like your entire life, that cloud is with you everywhere you go, okay? It can look like a lot of different things. Depression can also just look like exhaustion, right? You just do not have the energy to do anything. You don't have the energy to get out of bed on your days off. You're just exhausted, right? So remember when we talked about burnout, that can really feel like you're just done. You're toast. You don't have anything left to give. That could be some signs of depression. Likewise, it can look like lack of interest or motivation, right? So if there are things you used to love to do, let's say you used to love your company softball team, and now you just don't care, right? You can't get the energy to go to the games. When your coworkers hassle you about not showing up, you're kind of like, yeah, sorry, you don't care if they win or lose. That could be a signal of depression. You could be maybe feeling just that complete lack of motivation and interest. Okay? Something else may be feeling really empty, foggy, right? Maybe you just feel kind of blanked out. You can't even connect your thoughts. You just really can't, like you feel like you're moving through mud. You're just not operating very well. Okay. Additionally, there may be two ways. You could either be overeating, right? So eating your feelings, lots and lots of food, or undereating. You don't have the energy to make a meal. You're just not eating at all. Likewise, you could be sleeping all day long, lots and lots of sleep, too much sleep, or you're not able to sleep. Right? And I mentioned the way anxiety and depression can really work together. Sleep can be a big one of those ways, right? Maybe you're depressed and exhausted and empty and you can't sleep. And when it's time to go to bed at night, you're up and you're anxious. That's not uncommon. When we're actually diagnosing out of the DSM and you say major depressive disorder, it can be with anxious symptoms, right? Those two things can be very commonly intertwined. So if you're experiencing that, I want you to know that that's completely normal, okay? And then depression can also include thoughts of death and suicide, right? This feeling of just not wanting to do it anymore, wanting to be away from the sadness and the grief, that can be a part of depression. And if that is something that you are struggling with and you're thinking about, I really encourage you to reach out, even if it's just a passing thought. Okay, right? Passing thoughts happen. There's no judgment on that. And if you're struggling, reach out and get some help, right? We want you to operate closer down to this range. We are never aiming for never, right? That's not possible. So especially if you're a guardian, to operate with no anxiety and depression is probably not a goal that we can really seek, right? So don't ever hear me say that this is what we're looking for. But generally, we want to keep you away from being up here in the high. Okay, and then anxiety. So again, this is from the American Psychiatric Association. Anxiety is feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like heightened blood pressure. Okay? Anxiety is a part of life, right? An example is like riding a roller coaster, right? Sometimes excitement and anxiety can be really intertwined, and that is normal human reaction. You want to go on the roller coaster, and then you get to the front of the line, and your stomach's like, I don't think we want to do this, right? It's normal. Things like your wedding day or something like that, you're both incredibly excited and anxious. They can intermix, and that is normal and human. So I want you to know that if you're experiencing anxiety off and on, not a big deal. What you want to notice is, when are you clicking up to the point where it's interfering in your life, okay? So anxiety in general looks like some worry or nervousness, right? And again, this is part of life. Some common areas to worry about or be nervous about are things like loss, right? So maybe you're worried about losing the people around you, right? Again, we're in the middle of COVID-19, so we're very worried about potential loss of relationships, loss of our health. Financially, our country is in a really hard spot, so we're worried about financial stability, right? All those are completely common areas to be nervous about. We can be nervous about failure, right? So anxiety really tends to rise around things like public speaking, right? Because you're afraid to fail in a very public way. Super common to be anxious about failure. And then super anxious, especially if you're a guardian, to potentially be anxious about harm, right? So you see a lot of bad things, which means you may be nervous about a lot of bad things. You may be worried someone's going to break into your house in the middle of the night, or someone's going to crash into your car, right? All these things that you may encounter on a daily basis may be the kind of thing that kind of spins in your head and keeps you up, okay? Again, okay, that's fine. Just pay attention to how much impact it's having on your daily life and get the resources you need. Some other things about anxiety is it often has a physical component to it, right? So a lot of times your heart might pound. That's when I'm really anxious. I can feel my heart pounding. Maybe you feel like you're a little bit short of breath. One thing that's really coming out with COVID is a symptom of COVID is shortness of breath. People are anxious, right? They are appropriately feeling anxious, but then they start to feel a little short of breath, and then they're like, I think I have it, and then they get even more anxious, and then they can't breathe even more, right? And it's a spiral. This can happen with the heart palpitations. If you work in healthcare or as a first responder, then you know sometimes people are having a panic attack and they legit think it's a heart attack, right? Because there's a physical component that is very, very real. Those are the more extreme versions, right? But there's a physical piece of anxiety. You might sweat. There's all kinds of different things that can happen, and that gets tied to this emotional response of being anxious. Okay, and then a lot like depression, maybe you have trouble focusing, right? Maybe bouncing thoughts is part of the issue. Or maybe you can't really focus, or you can't really collect your thoughts, right? So you may know exactly what you're anxious about, and it's the same thought that runs through your head over and over. Or it may be just a general feeling of anxiety, but you can't put a finger on it, okay? It looks like all kinds of things for all kinds of different people, which is why I wanted to say whatever you're experiencing is your experience, and to take it seriously and to trust yourself, okay? And then finally, anxiety can have some of the same stuff where you're either overeating, right, shoveling it in, or you're not eating, you're too anxious, your stomach's upset, right? So we can have kind of a physical component of a lot of like stomach aches or maybe nausea. And anxiety can also just straight up cause vomiting and diarrhea. Like that is a very real thing that can happen. So maybe you're not eating, and then maybe your sleep is affected. So not sleeping is common. Sleeping too much is less common, but it may be how you cope with it. You're so anxious that you just try to sleep it and sleep away. You just try to ignore it and sleep it all away. Okay? All of that, again, is a completely normal part of the puzzle. It's a part of being human. If you're a guardian, it's even more a part of your experience. So again, what I want you to do is I want you to be kind to yourself, be honest with yourself, reach out for support if you need it, and as always, I appreciate everything you do.